It was 8 years ago. I was living in the US, and my husband and my son and I traveled to China in order to adopt a little girl. She was 18 months old and living in an orphanage. When we first met her, she was an amazing little bundle. She was calm, quiet, and very guarded. We instantly fell in love. And like all new parents who are welcoming a child into their home, we had some transition issues. We had some sleepless nights. Okay, a lot of sleepless nights. But we also had some developmental delays that we were dealing with. And we had expected this because when children are living in institutional settings, this sometimes happens. With the help of occupational therapy and speech therapy, developmental interventions of various kinds, her fine motor skills grew, her ability to communicate improved, and over time it seemed that whatever effects that came from living in an institution in her early years were decreasing. But there were some other behaviors that we were puzzled by. There was screaming that happened in the night sometimes. There were intense emotional tantrums. And there was running away from us that happened during fits of emotion. And we started thinking, well, what else is going on? Now, our social worker had prepared us that it's a huge transition for children in an international adoption. So our hearts filled with empathy for what it must be like when a child is taken out from their only home that they know and brought to another country to be with people who are essentially strangers and are now supposed to be their parents and their brother. But we also wondered, is there more going on? And here's an example of what happened. After my maternity leave, I gradually went back to part-time work, and we had decided that we were going to have her at our preschool that my son had been to. It was a great, loving, nurturing environment. The first day that I left her there, I dropped her off, and it was hard, but I was only going to be gone for a couple of hours, so I figured it wouldn't be that bad. But I was totally unprepared for what happened when I came back. It was a subtle thing, but it was powerful. See, the look in her eyes told me everything. It wasn't a look when I came back of happiness that I came back. It wasn't a look of anger that I had left her there. In fact, it was this eerie look that I can only describe as surprise. She was surprised that I had come back. And it was as if she had already determined that I was going to leave her, and I had left her, and in fact, she was just moving on with the next part of her life. And in that moment, it occurred to me that it seemed that she had this unconscious set of survival skills that she had already learned, and she was using them. So then I started talking to other adoptive parents, and I started finding out that actually many of them were dealing with similar kinds of emotional issues. And then I started working with families of all kinds and parents of all walks of life, and I started hearing similarities. Only their children had not been in orphanages. There was a child whose parents were working long hours, and their parents put this child with another family to live there for years while the parents worked. And the child only saw his parents maybe once every couple of weeks. There were children who were born in Hong Kong of mainland mothers, and their mothers had to travel back to the mainland for immigration reasons. And so the child was left with their father in Hong Kong and a series of domestic helpers, and they didn't see their mothers very often. There were children who were victims of domestic violence, and a parent who was incarcerated for horrendous domestic violence. And then upon his release from prison, the child was expected to reunite with the very person who had made their life so unsafe. And all these children had similar themes. They all had disruptions in their early attachment. And then I started seeing patterns in the children. You see, there were children who would zone out because they couldn't handle the intense, painful feelings they were dealing with. There were children who would get close to anybody because they never really learned that there are people you're supposed to get close to and people that you're not. And there were kids who were so emotionally out of control that they knew no other way to be except to be difficult. And guess what those kids turn into? Adults, right? But many of them turn into adults who zone out with alcohol, drugs, the internet, gambling, porn, because they don't know how to deal with the intense, painful feelings they're dealing with. Adults who will let themselves get close to the wrong people because they never learn to distinguish between people who are safe and people who are not. And adults who are so emotionally out of control that they know no other way to behave except to be difficult. Now, I have little judgment for the parents whose situations were the origins for these children. They were dealing with difficult, complicated circumstances. And if you ask these parents, they would likely say the reasons they made the arrangements and the plans that they did were for the children. They would likely say, I did it for her so she would have better opportunities. I did it for him so he would have a more stable environment. Or they would say that they did it for their own survival. I had no other choice. I did the best I could. But for the children, the questions they were left with were, why was I not wanted? Why did they leave me? What was wrong with me? And worse yet, were the questions that they already answered for themselves. And here's how they answered them. I'm bad. I'm unlovable. I can't trust others. I can't cope. The world is not safe. I must be in control. And I'm the worst person in the world. This last one was added by my daughter, who's now 9, when she reviewed my PowerPoint. She said, Mom, that one has to be on there too. It's 9-year-old language. Now, if these parents knew what kind of scars their children would be left with from these experiences, would they have chosen the same? I don't know. It's not my place to judge. But I can say that parents and caregivers absolutely need to understand that a child is not something that you check in at the counter of a long-haul flight that you call early childhood, and then you happily hope to reunite later at a baggage carousel called harmonious family. And you expect that baggage to arrive in some pristine condition called respect and trust for parents. Now, some of you are going to say, well, children are young and they don't remember anyways. But actually, that's incorrect. See, we know that children do remember. They don't necessarily remember verbally. They can't always tell you what they remember at a young age. However, their bodies do remember. And when children experience these kinds of attachment disruptions at a young age, it's like their brains get wired very early on to expect that there is threat all around them. And if you intervene early enough with the right kind of intervention, the good news is that in fact you can change that wiring. But, and that term is a term called plasticity. It's amazing that the brain can in fact actually change its neural wiring over time. It's good news for all of us. But wouldn't it be better if we never had to get there in the first place? Now, others of you are going to say, well, I had those kind of situations. That stuff happened to me, and I'm not like that. And if that's you, then I congratulate you. I celebrate your resilience. It very likely means that you had a decent prenatal environment to support your early development. It might mean that you were blessed with an easygoing temperament. It very likely means that you had at least one safe, nurturing caregiver who looked out for you and adored you. It might have been a grandparent, an aunt or an uncle, a teacher, a neighbor, a family friend. You see, the research shows that the presence of at least one attuned caregiver, one adult, can make a profound difference in a child's ability to face adversity later on in life. Take a look at this painting. This is by Mary Cassatt. What is this mother doing? She's helping this child see herself. And that's what we need, is more people helping children see themselves. Here's a beautiful modern version from China. When I was in the 5th grade, I won the school spelling bee. You know what a spelling bee is? Do they do those in Hong Kong? It's like you get a word, an English word, of course, and if you spell it correctly, then you stay in. And if you get it wrong, you're out. Okay, so the last person who's still standing up there spelling words correctly is the winner. Around that same time, I had a Sunday school teacher named Marcia. She was pretty, she was smart, she was warm and kind-hearted. She had no children and no parenting experience, but she was amazing. So I told Miss Marcia, Miss Marcia, I won the school spelling bee. I get to go to the regionals. And she said, oh my goodness, I want to come see you. Now, I didn't really take this seriously. I kind of forgot about it. But I'm up there on stage, kind of like I am now, freaked out, having to go through words, and the words are getting harder and harder. And I'm managing, but they're getting harder. And then I get my next word, and it's resurgence. Okay, I'm a 5th grader. I don't have any idea what that word means. And so I start spelling R, E, S, U, R, G. And then I pause, because I know there's a vowel, but I don't know which vowel it is. A or E, A or E, what do I do? A-N-C-E? And then if you've ever been in a spelling bee, you might recognize this reply. I'm sorry, but that's incorrect. My mind starts reeling. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. I start thinking about how I should have worked harder and how my parents are going to be disappointed in me. And unbeknownst to me, Miss Marcia had slipped into the room and watched the whole thing. And she's still got her coat on, and she's running from the back of the room up to me. And as I step off the stage and I'm looking blank, I see her face, and she has tears in her eyes. And she pulls me over into this side room. And she then did the strangest thing. She pulled me in close to her, and she cried. And when she cried, I cried too. Not because she made me cry, but because she was so attuned to me that she knew what I was feeling before I could ever put it into words. Now, sometimes people say, well, I can't read your mind. But you know what? At that point, Miss Marcia could. And I don't remember anything else she said that day, actually. She probably said something to me like, I'm proud of you. You're smart. It's going to be okay. I don't remember, and actually it doesn't matter, because what she did for me that day, I still feel it in my bones. And so, to conclude, if you're one of those children whose early attachment relationships were less than fantastic, find your way to healing and find it soon, because the earlier you do it, the more effective it is. And if you're a parent or a caregiver, please understand the vital importance of your caregiving role. It matters. Your consistent presence matters. And for all of us, how can we be a Miss Marcia? I don't know where you are, Miss Marcia, but I love you and I thank you because you gave me a gift of resilience. So please, let's all consider how to be a resilience builder. Because ultimately, we were designed to relate, to be connected to one another, and to love and to be loved. Thank you.